So I'm going to be discussing Dr. Nancy Ordover's book, American Eugenics, Race, Queer Anatomy, and the Science of Nationalism. So I'm only going to be focusing on two specific topics that she talked about. I'm going to be focusing on the ways in which American eugenics informed public opinion and policy, specifically in regards to forced sterilization and anti-immigration sentiments, and helping from anti-immigration sentiments leading up to anti-immigration laws. So eugenics was a science that really took off in the late 1800s, and it was aiming to try to help create a better human race. It was about blood purity, about categorizing human beings as those being superior and inferior, and trying to lead humanity towards perfection. And I guess basically breeding humans, just the way in which stock was breeded to help create the best stock. So when Dr. Ordover discussed forced sterilization and anti-immigration laws, she used two different terms that fit each of them. There's this idea of exclusive racism, which is racism that would fall in regards to things like forced sterilization and anti-immigration laws. It's things where you're trying to get rid of this group that you dislike, that you feel is inferior based on their race. And then there's the idea of inclusive racism, which she also discusses, but I'm gonna be focusing on forced sterilization and immigration. So we can see how these eugenicists, these scientists who were highly praised, had a lot of influence in politics and in public opinion. And it was something that as she mentions, was very resilient throughout all this time period. It never quite went away or died. There was moments in which it wasn't very popular, in which it came to be discredited, but then it resurfaced. It was never quite dormant. It resurfaced in a different fashion, in a different view, in a different way and shape. So I feel like both of these things, both forced sterilization, which took place against for a very long period of time, and against women of color, whether it was indigenous women, Latina women, black women, and it also took place with people that were disabled, people that were mentally ill, and it happened until very, very recently. It kept taking place. Anti-immigration, we can see how it had an influence in that in the past, especially when we think about the Chinese Exclusion Act. Dr. Ordover mentions how going through the newsletters that these eugenicists had, they took a lot of praise in both the science and the fact that their science was able to have such a big impact on policy. And I think we can see this today. So tying that into current modern day, I think although the term eugenics is not used anymore, it's something that we now consider to be pseudoscience, and having had such a negative influence when we think about how it helped inform policy work and help lead to genocide in Germany, but yet it's still taking place here today. We don't call it that anymore, but it's still taking place. And I think in many ways it's ironic and hypocritical, the ways in which the United States went in against Germany, but we had a lot of influence in those views that they had. And there was a lot of eugenicists who actually at that time period praised the Germans for what they were doing, and claim that it was actually a good thing. We just didn't realize it. And so I think the ways that we can see it in modern day is, for example, just thinking about Donald Trump, who is running for president and actually has so much support. And he has been bluntly racist, bluntly xenophobic, has made very discriminatory remarks, and yet he has so much support from the public. And I think the ways we can tie that in is when we think about this anti-immigration laws that eugenics informed, in which like these people coming in are going to ruin the American race. And so we can, when he made, for example, the comments about, oh, Mexico's not sending their best. These people are rapists. These people are criminals. So when he talks about that and generalizes these people, I think that shows us how we haven't come too far in our views, and how it can be seen as targeting a group that you see specifically as being inferior to the existing purity of America. And it's interesting when we think about this American race, specifically in the past, when we talk American race, blood, but in reality, what is this American race? It really was never pure white. I mean, the indigenous people were here before. They are the true Americans, but yet they weren't considered American. And there have always been all these, these different races, different groups of people. But the superiors have always been seen as the Anglo-Saxons and Nordic people. And that's still what we can see today. And then in regards to forced sterilization, I think the ways we can see it in modern day is that we've transformed it, in which if we look into how often women of color specifically, and marginalized communities, which are mostly composed of people of color, are targeted with forced contraceptives. So I think that's the way we've shifted. Nowadays, we can see how there's been court cases and laws in which, women have been forced to take contraceptives, such as like the Norplant. And so I guess just wrapping up, I would say that we really haven't come very far. We are still holding on to the sentiments that originated and were based off this idea of science and eugenics. And it's important to realize that science is informed, and nothing happens in a vacuum, and it's informed by policy and society and the way in which you were raised. And so there's always the possibility that can lead to a new form of science, which we will later discover in reality was pseudoscience and was racist. And so I wonder if 100 years from now, people will look back on our science and realize how it was a different form of eugenics. And so I think that's all